You're in a conversation, the one that you have when you're at a family gathering or after church, or maybe just a casual run in at the grocery store, and someone stops you and asks you, "So, how has it been going? What's going on with the thing?" And immediately you begin to tighten. You start to freeze because you know the weight that is underneath that question. They're really trying to gauge how far you've come or what progress has been made since the time has passed. And instead of answering the question from a place of confidence, you do the thing. You start explaining, you start qualifying, or you say things to try to bypass or minimize the fact that you're not where you thought you would be. Like, God is still moving, or I'm still working on it, or it's still a work in progress. And it's not that what you're saying in those moments are not true, it's the way that you're saying it that really gives everything away because you say it like it's an apology. You say it like you owe them something. Your explanations begin to become reports about your progress as if they need to give you some external approval. And the truth about that entire exchange, you walk away from that conversation feeling smaller than before it started. And today, we're going to end that. You have been apologizing for your speed. You have been shrinking your progress and over explaining your pace. And you've been doing all of that for an audience that was never assigned to evaluate it. But before we go any further, I want to dismantle the assumption that's lying underneath all of that. Because the problem is not that you've been apologizing for your speed. The real problem is that you believed that speed was the point. By the time we finish today, I want you to have made a decision, not just learned something, but actually decided on how you're going to show up for your journey from this point forward. Stay with me because this is going to be worth every minute. Significance and speed are not synonymous. In fact, I would say that they're opposites. And until you understand that, you will keep apologizing for something that never needed an apology because it wasn't a problem in the first place. I want you to take a second and I want you to think about the one hit wonders. Think about the overnight successes. I feel like we have a plethora that we can literally choose from, right? People that we've seen who have seemingly either risen to the top or have immediately gained exposure, success, the limelight, the spotlight. And then at the end of that, it kind of seems to have fizzled away. It's like we admire in our own lives the idea of seemingly making it overnight or getting to the place quickly that God has intended for us. But we have, through the picture of overnight successes, one hit wonders, a real life example of what it looks like when you are outpacing your real internal growth with external exposure. And what happens is you will see that there is something lacking, something missing. When you have a tree that doesn't have roots, that tree is not going to stand. Well, the same goes for people who have not really done their becoming work and then getting the opportunities and perhaps getting the exposure that they desire. It is something that really creates a catastrophe for them instead of it being the platform and the opportunity that allows them to continue to excel and succeed. And so, what does that show us? It shows us that when we prioritize speed over significance, we are missing the foundation of what makes something last. And I would submit to you today that significance requires depth. It requires preparation. And I believe that the only reason why you have yet to see the fulfillment of what God has deposited in you as a vision, as a promise, as something to be moving towards is because he loves you and he wants you to lean into being prepared and to not skip process. And when you lean into the process and you accept the preparation, you understand then that God is being merciful and God is being gracious in not giving you what you desire when you desire it. And Him withholding for a season is giving you the opportunity to build the fortitude that you need to carry the weight and the grace for what it is that you are meant to fulfill. You cannot hold the vision and the promise that God has given you in one hand while also holding a microwave timer in the other hand. Greatness takes growth over time. Becoming is not a popcorn effect. You do not get to set the timer, apply the heat, and then expect everything to be ready for you in 3 minutes. That's not how God works. And that is not how He has ever worked with people that He was serious about using for His glory. When you look at someone else and you start feeling like you're behind, here's what you're actually seeing. You're just seeing the constant use of that other person. You're seeing the constant promotion of the other person. You are seeing the platforms that that other person is being called to and being invited to. And maybe you're also seeing the following that starts to grow as a result of that. And you're sitting and observing all of those things happening for someone else, while simultaneously it feels like in your own journey with your own purpose, you're just inching along, or maybe not even moving at all. And when you're comparing those two pictures against each other, you start to draw conclusions. You start to think within yourself, or maybe that person has something that I don't have. Maybe they have a better story. Maybe they have a better network. Maybe they have more favor or more faith. In your mind, you're thinking, there just has to be something that I'm missing that this other person has that I don't have. And that's why I seem to be standing still, or that's why I'm not as far along as I thought I would be. And I get it. I get why that conclusion can feel true for you, because from where you're standing, that is what is happening. The evidence that you are visibly seeing seems to support that theory, right? But I would like to submit to you that you don't have all the facts for evidence, because for all of the things that you're seeing for that other person, there's a whole lot of other invisible evidence for them that you don't get to be privy to. You know, the invisible things like her progress, her process. You don't get to see her preparation. You don't get to even know the specific vision that God has downloaded in her spirit. And you most certainly don't get to know what it took to get her ready to carry that vision. But here's what I'm learning in this season more than ever is that the biggest thing that you really don't get to see for that other person is the same thing that you're experiencing now. The seasons of feeling hidden, of knowing that there's more, of knowing that there's an assignment and a calling on your life, while simultaneously wrestling with the fact that you feel like you haven't gotten to a place where you're able to fully fulfill it, where you're able to fully express it, and dealing with the frustration of the in between. So you don't even get to see the experiences that she had to have before the exposure that you seem to be witnessing in her life now. You don't get to know what it cost them to be able to show up right now. You don't get to know what they had to endure, what they survived, and what they had to actually walk away from before they fully committed. And what I've found is that God will allow you to be underrated for a season before He elevates you and allows you to go out and fulfill the assignment. The underrating season is not a verdict about your call, about your significance, about the value and who you're supposed to be in the kingdom of God. What it is is an opportunity for preparation. In my own personal experience, when I was starting out in ministry, I remember there being just so many other young ministers. And me being a young adult myself and having such a passion and a drive for the kingdom of God and other ministries thriving, excelling, and seeing my other fellow ministers thriving, excelling, I felt like I wanted to be in connection and in proximity with other people who were doing what I was doing and who were pursuing the things of God like I was pursuing the things of God. But I noticed that many times when I would be in conversations with those same ministers, that they were playing the same kind of loop that we're talking about right now, which is they're comparing themselves to other ministers. They're comparing themselves to other people who were seemingly getting the platforms that they weren't getting or getting the calls and invitations that they weren't getting. And how they would often share with me, like, I don't know why it seems like this person over here is getting the opportunity to speak, to preach, to do the things when like they can't even preach that great, or I don't know why they're getting the opportunity like they always get the opportunity. They don't want to use somebody new, they don't want to use somebody else. And then simultaneously, while saying that about another minister, they would also then reflect on themselves and say, well, like I know why they won't give me the invitation because, they just don't want to deal with me. They know that, I'm not the type of person that they want to bring out. I'm always going to say something that's a little bit too raw, or they don't want to deal with me because I don't have the look or I don't have the sound. And it's like the same thing that we're literally talking about right now, where you see someone else's elevation, you see someone else being used as evidence that something is wrong with you or that something is missing in you. And God never meant for that to be something that you were able to draw conclusions about yourself from, because at the end of the day, everyone has their assignment and none of our assignment is going to look the same. It's actually really funny that I'm even bringing this up as an example now, because at the time, this like 2 decades ago, I didn't see it for what it was. I didn't see it as comparison. I didn't see it as, them drawing negative conclusions about themselves based off of someone else's journey. I didn't see it that way. But I see it clear as day now. And I have even lived through seasons of this myself. Not that I was comparing myself to others, but just it was seeming like I wasn't getting opportunities or I was just kind of being hidden. And I had to realize that God will hide people for a season who are anointed to carry the message to nations, because he has to make sure that they're prepared to carry the weight of the assignment. And some of those same ministers that I was having those conversations with, years and years ago, are now having similar stories to what we talked about in the beginning of this video, which is, where are they? They're not around, or they're not, as far as they thought they would be, or maybe they're not even in ministry anymore. And people are wondering, like, what happened to them, right? And from this example, I think what we can draw is this, that you can speculate and you can spectate on someone else's journey, or you can decide that you are going to be active and engaged in your own journey and then start seeing the results from that. That is the choice. That is the decision that we have before us. And you are making that decision every single day, whether you're cognizant of it or not. The truth is, someone operating in their assignment, in their purpose, doesn't diminish yours. There were prophets who were contemporaries. They had their message and their people that they were assigned, and they were responsible for the message that God had given them and the people that God sent them to. And the same is true for us today. You look at Jeremiah and Ezekiel. You look at Isaiah and Micah. They existed during the same time. They were operating in the same era, but their assignments overlap, right? And one prophet's elevation was not evidence that the other prophet's message was less significant or less needed. Well, the same is true today in the kingdom. Someone else's rise does not equal to your delay. Someone else's opportunity doesn't equal to you being hidden for a season. And you cannot take what appears to be transpiring as evidence that God is not trying to use you and that your call is not going to come to pass. But what you should take as evidence is that if you are in a season where you feel delayed or you feel like you're being hidden, then this is the season that God is preparing you for what's to come. And I know what you're thinking. You're saying time does not stop for anyone. And I would have to agree with you. And because you think that, you also think, then I am getting to a space in an age where I cannot continue to wait any longer to do what God is calling me to do. You begin to think that the older you are, the less window of time you'll have to make the impact that God is calling you to make. I know. You've done the math in your head. You've sat around and you've seen other people that are operating at certain ages, and you're thinking to yourself, I can't see myself doing this at that age, or I need to hurry up and do what it is that I'm going to do because by the time I get to a certain space in my life, this is how things are going to be. But I want to ask you a question if that's how you're thinking today. What if the age that you're at right now is not evidence that you're late? What if the age that you're at right now actually allowed for the experience, the wisdom, the lessons that you need in order to fulfill the assignment? Let me just be honest with you right now. I could not have carried this assignment at 25. I could not have showed up for this assignment at 25. Not because I wasn't gifted, not because I wasn't someone who studied the word, well, not because I hadn't been trained, poured into, mentored, and literally entrenched in ministry and all the things concerning operating in purpose most of my life. I literally grew up in this. But what I do know is that there were some bushel experiences that happened in my life. There were some things that God had to take me through. There were some things that I went through that caused me to revert back to the background and to have background behavior, that I had to experience what it was like to learn how to come out of that background behavior, to learn what it meant to break through, to learn what it meant to show up so that I could be a witness, a firsthand example of what it looks like to do this bold becoming work. So you're thinking that for where you're at right now, that you can't afford to wait. And I would be inclined to agree with you. You can't afford to wait, but not in the ways that you think. You can afford to wait on your process. You can afford to wait on gleaning all of the lessons, the wisdom, the experience that God is giving you in these times. You can afford to wait when it comes to knowing that everything has a season and an appointed time. And one thing that I found in natural life is that I do not want fruit before it's time. And so if it is not due season yet for my assignment, my calling, my purpose that God has given me in this season, I'm okay with that. I can afford to continue to move in faith, continue to move forward with what I can do and not be attached to the results, because I know that eventually my obedience and my faith in action is going to lead to the promise, the vision being fulfilled. And if I can believe that, then I am trying to put that same belief in you today, to know that wherever you may be in your walk, wherever you may be in your becoming journey, is not a bad place to be. You are where you are, and there is nothing wrong with it. Because if it was not meant for you to be there, God would do whatever needed to be done to move you from the space. And so if you are there for a reason. But also know you are there for a season. This isn't permanent. This isn't a sign from God that you're supposed to quit the thing that He told you to do. No, sis, this is you learning to build that spiritual muscle of understanding that I can continue to move forward even when I'm not getting the external validation. I can continue to do what God has called me to do. Even when I'm not getting the invitations, I can continue to show up for this work that God has put in my heart, that has me staying up late at night praying and literally burdened for the people that I'm called to serve, because I know that just because I haven't seen the results yet doesn't mean that the results aren't coming. And you also have to know this, that you never get to see your ripples. What do I mean by that? I'm saying that you are the pebble, and when it is time, you're going to be thrown into the lake. And the lake represents people. You don't get to know how many people you're going to touch. But what I would also submit with that is that you don't get to know how many people are going to be touched because you touched people. That is the ripple effect. You don't know if God just has you assigned for one person who is meant to make a bigger impact than you could ever fathom or imagine. And instead of us focusing on our own personal significance, we should always revert back to the idea that Matthew 5:16 tells us, which is that men will see our good works and glorify our Father, which is in heaven, not ourselves. Here's where I want to leave us today. The people who come out of their hidden season ready and prepared for the work are not the ones who endured the longest. They're the ones who decided to become students in the midst of it. And there is a difference between surviving a season and mining a season. Surviving a season says, I just need to get through this. I can't wait for this to be over. But when you are mining a season, that says that God is teaching me something here. God is showing me something here. God is helping me to develop and to expand in depth first before I start to pour out. And that's where I want you to be by the end of this video. I want you to be in a place where you can say, what is God developing in me? What are the lessons that I'm getting out of this season? What is it that God is showing me, right? And what is being strengthened in me that I would not have ever received had I not been in this space? So here is what I'm asking you today. I'm not asking you to have it all figured out. I'm not asking you to have a plan for your platform and the ways that you are going to continue to get your name out there or network or whatever the case may be that you think is going to get you the results that you want to see. No, I'm not asking you any of those things. Here's what I'm asking you. I'm asking you to commit. Commit to your journey. Commit to where God has you right now. Commit to showing up as an active and engaged participant in your becoming instead of like a spectator of everyone else's. Become a student of your season. Ask the question, what is God teaching me through this experience? And then stay in the classroom long enough for you to actually get the answer. Your harvest time is coming, but not if you keep digging up the seed to show people that you actually planted something. You just have to tend your ground. You have to trust your timeline and stop apologizing for the speed that God has you at. Because when it's time for you to step into your purpose, when it's time for you to reveal what God has been developing in you, the world is going to not only need it, but it's going to be ready for it. And so will you. Finally, I want you to know that speed is not something that you have to explain to anyone else. You do not have to get someone else to understand your pace. You are where you are. You are where God has you. And you are not behind. You are being built. And everything that God has allowed you to go through, every season, every delay, every time it felt like things just were not coming together as fast as you wanted them to, all of it was intentional. And if you know that God is trustworthy, that means that you can afford to commit to your journey. You can afford to become a student of your season. And you can always afford to trust the one who has authored your faith story, because he is the one in control of the timeline and he has never gotten the timing wrong yet. If this video landed for you today, I need you to do two things. Number one, I really would love for you to go over to Bold Becomers podcast and listen to our latest episode, Ditch the Timeline. You are not behind. It's even available right here on YouTube, and I'll leave it down in the description. But second, I want you to go and grab my gifted guide, Permission to Shine. This is going to be your starting place for understanding what God has been developing and also why he's been keeping your light hidden for the season. It's also going to help you to start moving out of it. The link for both of these are going to be in the description. I want you to always remember that you were made to shine, not on anyone else's timeline, only on God's. And God's timeline has never been late a day in his life. Remember to keep becoming. I'll see you next time, Bold Becomer.